Hey, everybody. We are here today, Tracy and I, to talk about the changing landscape, particularly in California, for the February 2025 bar exam. It is a strange time, isn't it, Tracy?
It is strange. This kind of came out of the blue to begin with, and it came out in a very uncomfortable way in that it seems as though the NCBE and California and Kaplan are airing all of their messiness out in public.
Yeah, and for those that are not aware of what's happening, California announced a few months ago that they were looking into the possibility of moving away from the multi-state bar exam, which is written and administered by the National Conference of Bar Examiners, as early as February of 2025. And then the question was, what are they going to replace it with? And then California announced that they had been in secret negotiations with Kaplan Bar Review for Kaplan to provide the California examiners with a multiple choice exam, not the multi-state, but some sort of a test. And it might include essays and performance tests. It might include multiple choice, but it was going to be something other than the bar exam as we knew it, what we would call the legacy exam. At that point, the NCBE stepped in and said, wait a minute, we think there's some intellectual property rights here that need to be resolved. And it looked like the plan was going to be shelved. Then last week, we heard that maybe they've got it resolved, and so we're moving forward with the Kaplan plan. What do you make of all this?
I think it's far from resolved, and I think that trying to do this with the very next bar exam is short-sighted because I don't see how it's going to be fair to any of the bar takers. There's no materials out. They don't really even know. We don't know what the structure of this exam is going to be. And if you are one of those persons that is lined up to take the February 2025 bar exam in California, at this point, you are left unknowing what it's going to look like, what is going to be tested, how it's going to be tested, how it's going to be scored, all of these things. So it seems like it's too early and too confused at this point.
Yeah, it really does. The impetus behind all of this is that the California bar has run out of money. They simply can't afford to rent the testing centers that they need to administer the bar exam. So California went to the NCBE and said, we want to go back to at-home testing or independent testing sites like the Pearson testing centers. And the NCBE said, no, absolutely not. And Tracy, you and I did an interview with the representative of the NCBE, and we're going to release that soon, in which we asked about that. And she was very explicit that the NCBE is not going to allow at-home testing or testing sites for anything other than accommodated applicants. And so there was an impasse here. I really wondered whether or not California might not just scrap the February 2025 exam because they couldn't afford to rent rooms. At this moment, as we're recording, it looks like they're going to try to do this new Kaplan exam, but I'm not sure that NCBE has really signed off and said, sure, that's okay with us. So it's still very much up in the air. And I think that's what you're alluding to. It is a very strange time if you're taking the February test in California. What we have been told is that by late fall, and it's no more specific than that, by late fall, there will be testing materials available, but we're not sure who's going to have access to them. We're not sure what those materials will look like. We don't know what the scoring would be. We don't even know what the subject matter would be at this stage. So what should a California February 2025 applicant be doing here in July of 2024, in your opinion?
I think that you go ahead with our course as it's set up because what you're learning at this point is the technique. And the technique of selective intuition that we teach for taking multiple choice will still apply. The technique that we have called FLA for writing essays and MPTs will still apply. So work on your technique, work on your mind maps as far as substantive law goes, and don't worry so much about what the test will look like at this point. It's still pretty early as far as that goes. So just work on the process. We still are
Yeah.
here and available for you with the current course. We suggest you go ahead and sign up for that, and we'll be here to coach you along the way as we find out how things are going.
Yeah, and we'll adapt as we learn what's happening. Our assumption is that the 7 multi-state subjects will continue to be tested. Now, a little bit of background here is that Kaplan's multi-state questions actually have the same genesis that our questions do. They actually came from a company called SMH Bar Review back in the 70s and 80s. SMH then was the predecessor company to Celebration Bar Review and a partner of ours at a company called the Study Group. The Study Group sold out to Kaplan. And so those are the questions that Kaplan has. Now, we don't expect that they're going to be able, because of intellectual property rights, to use those same questions, but that would be the basis, I think, for the questions that they would write. What we don't know is how many questions, what the mix of questions would be. We don't know what the scoring would be. All of those things are unknown. However, to the extent that those 7 topics would still be testable, we assume that the same principles of law that we've always tested, the formation of contracts, tort negligence, hearsay evidence, and so on, would remain testable, and so the core materials would remain the same. There will obviously have to be some adaptation and changes as we learn more information. The other part of this is that if you're taking the exam in California, it doesn't look like you're going to go to a testing location as you have in the past. You'll be doing the exam from home, perhaps from a testing center, a third-party center. And we've had experience with that during the pandemic. We prepared students in California and elsewhere for in-home testing. So we've got all those materials and we have all of those approaches. And we'll be talking about those and incorporating those into the course as well. So there is a lot of unknown right now. And I expect that this situation will continue to change pretty frequently and rapidly between now and the end of the year, don't you?
I think so. It's a developing story. So you'll want to stay tuned to our channel to get updates. Perhaps get on our Q&A sessions on Wednesdays to get further updates. And of course, we'll send out emails. We know those of you who are registered for that exam. But for any of you that are inquiring about what bar review course to take at this point, and you're looking at California, be assured that Celebration Bar Review will be ahead of the story and will prepare you for the exam.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the questions that we've already heard from people is, wait a minute, Kaplan's a bar review. How are they going to write the test? What happens to their bar review? Under the terms of the agreement, as we understand it, Kaplan will voluntarily relinquish their ability to sell a bar review course in California. We also know that there are companies that take questions from Kaplan and might still be in that market. So we just don't really know what that means. And I understand that it might be tempting to think that you want to buy something that's affiliated with Kaplan because it'll give you some leg up in doing this. I have to believe the integrity of the bar and the bar examiners will not allow that to happen. Now, one of the other things that we've seen mentioned in the media in the last week or so is, would other bar reviews step in and try and write their version of tests to compete against Kaplan in other jurisdictions or maybe even in California? Who knows? This is not something we plan on doing, but it is certainly a possibility. And I think it could very much change the landscape. So I think there's some advantage to being in a bar review course that's going to keep its focus on the applicants, the students, and not looking to become a provider of questions. That's not at all what we intend to do. And I think there's a reason to stay with a course that's got its focus on you as an applicant and not on the bar. Don't you?
I agree. I think it's going to be very important that you have personal coaching if you are going to be taking the California bar in February 2025. And we have that as part of our package automatically when you buy our course. I'm thinking of those of you out there who may have already bought the Kaplan course and you're going to need to move. And you have an opportunity to move to a big box company, but you also have an opportunity to move to a place, as Jackson says, like ours, who focuses on you, the applicant, and provides you with these personal resources that the big box companies are not going to have. And they may not be able to pivot as fast as we can pivot to even get you prepared for this major change in California.
Literally no one saw this coming. So I think it's going to be a really turbulent time. And I would encourage you to stay connected. If you're already in a Celebration Bar Review course, there's no upcharge for these changes. It's just part of your course. continues on as we already have. If you had our lifetime pass guarantee, it still applies for this exam, even though it's a different test. So we're honoring all of our commitments there. And we will stay ahead of this as much as humanly possible, and as much as we're allowed to, frankly, by the Cal Bar and how they decide to license and put out questions and information. But frankly, even if they didn't license it, as I said, we've got a core of questions that we think are going to be pretty similar to what Kaplan's going to do. So I'm not worried about our ability to provide good quality materials for our applicants and for our students. One last point I want to make. This is not the next generation bar exam. California is not going with the next generation bar exam. There's a lot to be said about that. That'll be a different video, Tracy. We'll talk about some of the other states and jurisdictions and what they're doing with next gen. But as far as we can tell, this is the beginning of a competitor bar exam to the NCBE's test. Right now, California is the only state that looks like they're adopting it. Nevada might. We've got some other states that I'm sure are watching to see what would happen. But for right now, it's only California at this moment. Nevada's requesting information and input from their stakeholders, and we'll keep you informed if that changes as well. So if you're in the UBE, if you're in Florida, if you're in Georgia, those things won't change, at least for the time being. That's the status. That's what we know as of this moment. Please stay in touch, and we will be sure to continue to communicate as events happen. Thanks for being with me, Tracy. It'll be an interesting time, won't it?
It will. And if you want to have a inquiry discussion with Jackson, that's a free consultation that we offer. Just get a hold of him through our website, which is celebrationbarreview.com. And we'll schedule a time for you to have that session with Jackson. You can ask him questions about what's happening and about your process, about how we can be of service to you.
And for some people, it may make sense to just get out of California entirely now and take a different exam. So we can talk about that one-on-one and offer you our perspective and advice. All right. Thanks, Tracy. Glad to see you. And for everybody that's watching, hang in there. We're on this ride together, and we'll see what happens. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.